Babylon, burn Babylon, burn, burn, burn Babylon, burn Babylon, burn, burn, burn Babylon, burn Babylon, burn, burn.
That was my boy Diesel Automatic with Burn Babylon Burn. If you guys get the chance, Diesel D has been on the show a few times. He's an amazing rapper, highly underrated. You should check out his music. Diesel Automatic is his name, and the title of that song is called Burn Babylon Burn. And I thought that the song was relevant for the times, but welcome everyone to Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any channel members and or moderators out there. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. The show has always been a podcast. You can download the audio only episodes to whatever podcast platform you listen to: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. The show drops on all of those platforms almost immediately after it's released here, wherever you're watching this. We are also a viewer-supported show. We don't have sponsorships, advertising, or affiliate programs. It's just me. So if you'd like to help support the show, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description and are highly appreciated. Also, you can send in super chats and super stickers if you would like a question or a comment to be highlighted during the show. Channel memberships are also available and are a great way to help support the show monthly. And when you become a channel member, you get access to bonus episodes for being a channel member. And there's a huge back catalog of past channel members only shows that I've done. Click the more button underneath the title of this video to the drop down of the description. All of my links are in there, and including the links for today's guest as well. And today's guest is he. Welcome to the show, organic farmer, investor, and host of both the Parallel Systems broadcast and Parallel Mike podcast. He is an advocate for living purposefully, natural health, self-sufficiency. Parallel Mike, welcome to the show, my friend. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Ryder. It's a real honor to be on your show. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I second what Ryder said. Sponsor the channel, send Ryder some money. We need it over here in the real alternative media, and I class you as one of the real ones out there, Ryder. So huge pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate it. I've been on your show a few times, so I was like, man, we need to bring him over here. And you know, I get more and more puzzled by this community every single day, Mike. It's so interesting how people say that Hollywood is satanic and that the celebrities and the stars are the problem, and LA is a cesspool of energy vampires, and that it's a dark, dingy place, which is, it's true. I've been there. You know, I was there actually last year, and it is pretty disgusting. But it's so interesting how much garbage people throw at LA and Hollywood and celebrities and rich actors and musicians. And now that there's a tragedy that has happened, and you know, a lot of LA is up in flames currently, everyone's now all of a sudden sympathetic toward the rich and the powerful and the celebrities and the actors and the musicians, right? When they were the bane of everyone's existence just a couple of days ago. Isn't that weird how that works?
You know, I think a lot of what happens now is weird, right? And a lot doesn't make sense. And I think when it comes to narratives, people get on board with what they're told to get on board with. I'm a real big believer that people do what they're told to do, even though a lot of the times they might think that it's come about naturally or that it's come about from the alternative community. I don't think so. I mean, there's quite a few things that have happened over the last few months. For example, there's a big one in the UK, a big story that's broken, that's been around for about 25 years. And I'm always asking myself, why now? Like, why is that story come around now? And I always think it's because somebody's turned the dial on that one. You know, what's happening in LA is a tragedy. It's really strange you mention it, because I've just done a podcast about an hour ago with my good friend Monica Perez. She was one of the people who actually had a house there. Her whole street has burnt down. So that's crazy. So I'm still kind of processing what she just told me about her experience. She evacuated. Her house survived, but it was the only one on the street. Everything up until her house burnt down, and her house would have burnt down if she hadn't have snuck back in after they evacuated. and fought the fire with her neighbor. It's a crazy story. If anyone's interested in hearing a personal testimony, you can check that one out when it drops. I think it'll be tomorrow or the day after, Cognitive Dissonance. But yeah, I know how you feel, Ryder, that there's a kind of schizophrenia to the alternative media. People 1 minute are saying one thing, like, for example, North American Union used to be bad, now it's good. Bitcoin used to be about rebellion against the state, now it's cheered on because it's going to be pro-state and they're going to adopt it. Like, none of it makes any sense. And I think sometimes you've just got to sit back, my friend, put your feet up and watch the show, because it is a big show.
You hit the nail on the head there. And when it comes to the fires, it's really funny because no one really cares about the normal everyday people that are being affected, the people that are just trying to make it, the businesses that are being destroyed. And I believe last I checked, 5 people died because of the fires. But all I see is people making videos about which celebrities had their houses destroyed, right? Like top 10 lists are coming back now, Mike. Top 10 celebrities that had their houses destroyed by the LA fires. And I don't believe that that's what we should be focusing on, right? We should probably be more focused on why the mayor was on vacation. Why weren't there any preventative measures taken by the governor or the mayor? Why were the dams empty when it could supply more water to the firefighters? Why aren't we raking the forests in California to try and prevent these types of fires from happening? Why was it reported that house insurance companies, property insurance, no longer covered fire insurance? That they reportedly, now I'm saying reportedly, that happened back a few months ago. And everyone knew that this could happen. People have been talking about this for years. To me, it seems like a bunch of negligence and greed.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever I hear something like this, I always think, well, what was being done in the build up to it? Why was there so many mistakes? It feels like a snowball of mistakes, right? Like any one of these things by themselves, you might say, okay, well, that's human error. But at some point it turns into purposeful negligence when I think there's 5, 6, 7, 8 things. And, I was reading on a Twitter thread, it was brought up by my friend Roy. He said, check this out, Mike. And I think it was Amazing Polly. She's got quite a popular Twitter thread. She's a very skeptical person. She kind of digs deep into the research. I think you'll know who I'm talking about.
I remember Amazing Polly. She got her channel scrubbed way back in the purge. But yeah, she's a pretty good journalist.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, and she made a really interesting thread about this fire, about a company that's involved, and they had a private contract for all of the specific areas where these fires were. And I don't know about you, Ryder, but I just feel like this is our future for now. I think we're going to get a lot more things like this. We can sit and argue about why they happened, who's behind it, what the agendas are, but ultimately, I think we're going to have to adapt as well and accept that the future is going to have a lot of these strange incidents, and they'll say it's for climate change and they'll blame it on all these other reasons. But for us as the little people, I mean, what do? We're going to have to become tough, and we're going to have to start having really good foresight to try and prepare for, hopefully not being there when these things strike. Me and my wife just had a conversation. We live in a forest. It's like, what do you do? Do we how do you run away from potential forest fires that may or may not be intentionally lit? I don't know, Ryder. I don't know how you feel about this.
What did your person say that was on your show that's going to be released tomorrow? Because she was there, she's in boots on the ground person that lived there. What did she say about what she's heard, how these fires started?
She said that the electricity had been turned off. So that was the first thing. It'd been off for like 3 hours before the fire was even ignited. So it wasn't an electricity pole or anything like this. And she said that the fireman told her the rumor was it was arson. It was a firebug. So it was intentionally set. But again, we're never going to know. We're never going to get an official statement that says somebody set arson, I don't think. What we'll probably get is that it was an climate change fire. I think that's probably what they'll go with, and we can be as skeptical as we want. So I just think our future is going to be very difficult to navigate whilst we have all of these strange weather events. We have more civil disobedience, more social unrest, more war, and some of the things we can prepare for, some of the things we can navigate our lives around. For example, if you see the country you're in being dragged into a war, then you might want to get out of there. But when it comes to things like that, like a forest fire, I don't know how you deal with stuff like that, Ryder, because unless you try and insulate yourself from everything and live in a bunker, which most of us ain't going to be doing, then I think we're just going to have to get really resilient and thick-skinned and do our best. And my friend Monica, she's still clearly in shock. Like, we was talking to her, she was very she articulated her thoughts really well and she spoke fantastically, but you can see, somebody's life is kind of flashing before their eyes. She thought she'd lost everything, like her entire life's belongings. And now she's got to contend with going back to a street that is burnt down. Like, all of the infrastructure's gone, everything's melted, there's no electricity, and her house is still there, and you can't sell it because no one's going to buy that house, and yet you've got a massive mortgage on it. So really tough decisions, I think, for people like that.
Yeah, I think that the only way you're going to get in one of those bunkers if you're Mark Zuckerberg. I think didn't Mark Zuckerberg build like a huge underground bunker in Hawaii?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I would. if I had all those billions, I'd have about 5 or 6 bunkers on different continents. I mean, I'm not surprised they're doing it, but then I guess it does beg the question as well: why? Like, do they have information to make them want to build a bunker? Do they think something major is going to be happening in the next few years? Or are they just like us guys and seeing what's going on and saying, well, we can afford a bunker, so build one?
Well, I can't get rid of this freaking ad at the bottom of the screen, but inside Mark Zuckerberg's top secret Hawaii compound, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is building a sprawling $100 million compound in Hawaii, complete with plans for a huge underground bunker. A Wired investigation reveals the true scale of the project and its impact on the local community. Here's a picture of apparently the land that he purchased in Hawaii, but I don't understand why Hawaii. Like, unless you're, expecting a big, like some kind of war in the United States, because Hawaii, I don't believe, is a good place to be protected from any kind of natural disasters. I mean, it's a giant island. But it's interesting too, because Mark Zuckerberg was just on Joe Rogan today, and he's talking about all this censorship from the Biden administration, and now he's basically switched gears. He's more on the Elon Musk version of this. He's a bandwagoner. He's just flipping sides for the administration. If Trump wouldn't have won, then he would have never have said any of this stuff. But he's saying that the Biden administration would call his people at Facebook and like yell at them and scream at them and tell them to censor people on like Meta and on Instagram and on Facebook and all that. And it's so interesting because I'm pretty sure he said in court that Facebook never censors people's content on there, and now he's completely switched gears. It is very interesting. It's such an interesting time that we live in, Mike. Thing people are flipping back and forth. They don't know what to believe anymore. All this confusion and everything. But thanks for coming on, though, brother. I really appreciate it. Can you introduce yourself to the audience? Where you're from, what your channel is about, and how you got into this type of space and creating your channel?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Great Britain originally, so I'm from England, and I had kind of a life before podcasting, as all of us do. I was actually involved in counseling and therapy, so that was kind of my background, and I did that for 13 years or so. So working with young people, young carers, teenagers, that was kind of the age range that I worked with, trying to get them while they was young, so they wasn't kind of whisked off to a life of crime and drugs and all the kind of problems that you don't want young people to get involved with. So that was really awesome. It was rewarding work. And, at some point, I really got interested in finance, just kind of skating over my life a little bit. But I was also an endurance athlete for a time. So I was doing my career and working part-time there, and then also training pretty much full-time as an athlete to try and become an elite ultra runner. So I was running 100 miles a week. And that really was my like real passion. It was two passions. I mean, I loved my career, but that came to an end through injury. And where that left me was with a lot of time, because you know yourself as a podcaster, if you do anything with a passion, whether it's researching, podcasting, whatever it is, if you love something, you put all your effort and time into it. And then for that, with this sport, it just got taken away through injury. I spent years trying to get over the injury. I couldn't. So I had a lot of time on my hand. And that's when I really got interested in finance and monetary history. I kind of met my wife and we decided the world's looking a little bit iffy. we might want a bunker. We didn't get the bunker, but we did want to have like an organic farm, take care of ourselves a little bit more, be off grid, just really start to take back control of our lives. And I realized that the 9 to 5, or for me, it was more of an 8 till 8, let's say. It was a busy career, but it wasn't that financially rewarding. My wife too, she was very talented in her career. She was an artist, but again, you know, if you're on a salary these days, buddy, you know how it is. It's difficult just to make ends meet. It doesn't matter how high you climb in a career, unless you're making money for other people, you're not valued in society. And you know, it's sad to say, and I'm sure listeners understand what I'm saying too. You know, we've got people working like in care professions, nurses. They're getting paid worse than somebody who works in a bar. You know what I mean? It's awful. So I decided I needed to fix that, and that's when I got really interested in finance. And all that time I spent running, I now dedicated towards monetary history and finance. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. We moved on to a boat. We lived there, saved every penny we could. Just grinded, really, buddy. Yeah, just really grinded for about 5 or 6 years. And then after that, we bought our farm where we live now. So we moved to Central Europe, live on our organic farm. I produce a lot of content around finance and investing, just trying to support really regular people with wealth preservation mainly. So it's not really about, you know, YOLO, get rich, or any of that stuff, although it's great if you can earn money, but it's more about protecting what you've got and just learning the art of wealth preservation and risk management, so we can make it through these really difficult times without losing everything, without having our wealth taken by all kinds of threats that are out there. And then I also started a podcast, and yeah, I was inspired by people like you, actually, buddy. So, you know, seeing people that was produced, because I've got a lot of interest. My degree was actually theology, so I'm quite into the esoteric spirituality. All my life I've been studying that stuff. So I found my YouTube channel towards finance. Like, I couldn't help but sometimes start to discuss stuff, and people were like, whoa, what's this mashup here? Like, spirituality and finance, and it doesn't quite mix. So I thought, right, I'm gonna have to make a podcast to really express what I want to express. And now I do both, and it takes up a lot of time, but it's very rewarding, and get to speak to cool people like you. I can just call someone up or message them and say, listen, will you come talk to me for 2 hours on a show? And they'll be like, yeah, that's a really awesome gift. I think it's a blessing. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but I do enjoy it, buddy.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, and I don't think people realize how much work and effort and time and energy to put into all this stuff it takes. I mean, we're like a one-man show. We do all this stuff ourselves. We create it all. We create the thumbnails, we create the videos, the editing, the reels, the short videos. Like, it's all us. Now, when you said you lived on a boat, a house, but you were on a houseboat?
Yeah, me and my wife moved on to, I mean, we can call it a houseboat, but it was 8 meters, so it wasn't.
Oh man.
I was call it a tiny houseboat.
So you like lived in your kitchen and in your bathroom, pretty much?
Yeah. The bathroom was in the bedroom. It was very well designed, 8-meter boat. I'll give it that. It was quite well designed. But that was a trip, you know. In winter, the ice was on the inside, so it gives you an idea. There was no insulation. I mean, we had one pane windows, and there was no shower on the boat. So I used to get showered on the deck in like -5. I'd be out there in the snow, and it taught me a lot. It taught me about living small, appreciating the little things, and also I just loved it, actually. You know, being close to nature. We was on the water. There was other people in the marina where we stayed, so it had this quirky little community. Every kind of like societal dropout and you know, stranger and weirdo kind of coalesced around this boat community. So we had a laugh, met loads of interesting people, and that gave me the excess. You know, I wasn't somebody who was earning a fortune in my career. So I was like, well, what metrics do I control? I'm not going to be able to increase my salary overnight by like hundreds of thousands. That wasn't possible. Not in Great Britain. The salaries there, some of the worst in the world. And despite me being quite advanced in my career, you know, I was kind of a manager at the time, but it made no difference. So I was like, well, I'm going to live small and get my outgoings down as much as possible. And that was our sacrifice, was moving to the boat, which turned out not to be a sacrifice at all for me because I loved it. And I'd moved back there in a shot, although I'm sure that whole world's changed over there. But
wife probably wouldn't like that too much.
I know. I don't think she would. She actually was scared of water. She had a bit of a phobia. So that was a challenge for her to live on a boat. And for anyone who's ever stayed on a boat, you know, you asleep at night, and where we was, it was kind of low down into the berth of the boat. And, you know, in storms, you've got this water sloshing and you have nightmares of drowning because all this water, you can hear it. It's like living in a drum. So it's an interesting life. Like, I would totally recommend it for anyone that wants adventure, or if you want to kind of leave behind mainstream society a bit, then yeah, definitely consider a boat. It's kind of the alternative to van life. And yeah, I'd go back to a boat in a shop. But like you said, convincing the wife at this stage, I think it's an impossibility.
Yeah, now when you got a farm and you got an organic farm and you're growing a lot of your own food and stuff, do you have animals on the farm too?
Yeah, we do. Not as many as we would, because we've got a difficult situation in the country that we're in, just with it being close to a war. So we've kind of hung fire on a little bit. We've been here on the farm, we've been here quite a few years. So we've got about 100 birds mainly. So we've got geese, chickens. We sometimes have rabbits and other small animals, but the goal was always to have, you know, a milk cow. But our neighbor's got one. So for now, we're kind of good there. We get our raw milk from our neighbor. And yeah, where we live is a farming community. So if you don't make it or you don't grow it, somebody close by does, which is ideal because we're trying to be self-sufficient. So one thing that you learn very quickly when you try and do that is it's really hard. You think you're going to be able to do it all yourself, but you can't. I think you need people around you, and it's a lot of work to grow your own food. I think 3 years in, we're getting there now. This year was our most successful year for sure. So I'd say we probably grow about, 40 to 50%, but we're at that point now where if we needed to ramp it up in a crisis, like turn that dial up and produce enough to survive, we could. I mean, from our beds, we probably will be getting about 60, 70 eggs a week this year. So that's a lot, you know, and we sell them, we trade them with neighbors. My hairdresser, she takes eggs as payment. So when I go to the city, I take my eggs with me, and she'll accept payment in eggs because, you know, people want quality, and our birds get to, you know, they ain't living in some shabby run. They can go and eat the grass. We've got a big plot of land. So yeah, we're doing as much as we can, and I think that's the ethos that I try and share with people, is do as much as you can. Like, even when I lived on the boat, Ryder, 8-meter boat, we had decking going around it. We grew potatoes and sacks. we had herbs. We had all kinds of stuff. The duck community where we lived was very happy with our boat because they could come and steal all of our food. And I always just try and advocate to people, like, don't look to somebody who's living on a farm or whatnot and think, oh, I wish I could. I'm never going to get there, because we started small as well. We started as small as you can get. And I think in life, it's always about taking the steps you can take and then just expanding slowly. Don't try and, you know, sprint for the finish right away, because there's a lot of learning required as well. Like, we've learned so much in 3 years. We made so many mistakes, and I think that's part of the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people, they want to live on a farm because, you know, back 30 years ago, it was more like the people that were, you know, on a farm, they were kind of looked at as like, you know, hicks and like rednecks, and like that's not what people want to do, but they want to live in the city. And now it's like flipped back around, you know. Now the van life seems like the dream life, and having an organic farm sounds like the dream life, and having chickens that like lay eggs, it seems like the dream life now, you know.
It's crazy. Like, that is really crazy. And you know what's strange though? I was thinking about this, is as the pendulum swung from, you know, yeah, the farms are for the poor people. Like, I mean, it was the poor people. They had to do that. And then it was like the people who could choose to get somebody else to produce the food, water, and energy, they would, and they'd live in a city and get it all delivered. And then all of a sudden people were like, well, I don't know if I trust these systems anymore. I mean, they're not letting me go into Starbucks without a mask and a card. And all of a sudden people started to, this distrust in the modernity began to arise, and then they started to go back the other way. But the problem is, now going back from the city to the farm, first and foremost, you've been severed from all of those skills, that intergenerational knowledge that you would have had passed down from, parent to child and grandparent to grandchild. The communities as well are harder to get into because, of course, they're all established. So you just kind of this city guy turning up and being like, I want a farm, and they're like, well, good luck. And it is kind of like that, you've got to work your way into those communities. But then the other thing, Ryder, is it's not so easy. There's a barrier of entry for most people in terms of cost. It used to be anyone could buy a cheap plot of land. I think back in the early 1910s, 1920s in America, they were begging people to go onto the land. They were saying, we'll give you some acres, we'll set you up. And the department, I don't know what, the Department of Agriculture, maybe,
Yes.
You can still buy this pamphlet online. It's like a little green book. And it was designed for homesteaders. And it was produced by the American government. And it was showing you how to set up I think it was a 2-acre or 3-acre plot perfectly to produce everything you needed to survive. And nowadays, though, I don't think that's what they want for people. I don't think they want you to be self-sufficient.
No, they've turned that into, because it used to be, in some states it's still like this, where you go fill out a form. I forget exactly what the name of the form is, but it's if you want to buy land and like build on the land, you get the land for a cheaper rate. And now a lot of states have turned that into, it's only for like low income housing projects and like big companies and big like corporations that want to come in and put a bunch of low income housing or like apartments or whatever there. It's no longer for the common everyday person. If they want to go and purchase land, it's now for people that, companies and low income housing. So now you can't even fill out that form anymore and get land for cheap, even if you had enough money to build a house now or a farm or whatever that you want to do.
The bar to entry is way higher, and a lot of people going back to farming are like middle class people, like hobby farms, and I totally get it. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not doing anything wrong, but I think it's really sad that people can't choose that. That's not something that you can easily choose, should I say. You can choose it, but you're going to have to probably work harder for it than you would have done 20, 30 years ago. And land prices just keep going up and up. In the UK, for example, if you wanted to buy 4 hectares of farmland, you're talking millions of pounds. So maybe a couple of $1 million. Yeah. And that's not something that, your everyday working class person can do. Fortunately, in the country I live, it's still feasible. If a young person gets to 20 years old and decides they want to buy a farm instead of living in a city, you'll be able to buy your farm cheaper than you would buying the house in the city. So you've got the optionality, and there's no high bar to entry. You could choose anywhere in the country and probably be able to afford a farm. But I think those days will pass us by quite quickly. And so I think now we're living in that phase of history where if you want to get back to the land, you've got the chance and the opportunity, but it has to be now. I think 10, 15 years could be too late for a lot of people. Maybe rich retirees could afford some land, but for the everyday person, it'll be difficult.
Yeah, and speaking of like the financial system, like you're, I guess I could call you could you call yourself a financial analyst?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, financial analyst and monetary historian, I guess, are the two things that I do.
So because a lot of people think that they're going to become like rich overnight with buying stocks and like trading, that they're all of a sudden going to get into thousands and thousands of dollars. And that's not normally how it works. It's normally takes a lot of time and patience and like waiting and buying something really low and waiting sometimes years for something to actually shoot up. Is that what you've come across too with investing in stocks, and how does that work?
Yeah, I think so. I think we all hear the stories of the person who bought, Bitcoin at a few bucks and then and millions off it because they bought like 50 Bitcoin. But even then, that person who did that probably was a buy and holder. The reason they did that is because they truly believed in something. They bought it when nobody else cared, really.
Oh no, Mike froze. He'll come back. Jethro, the only affordable places are always in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, that is definitely the case. That is definitely the case with the United States for sure.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. The some connection issue there, but yeah, and then you've got the other narrative, which is you buy something and you get rich overnight, and that is truly a fantasy. And the reason is, even if you was lucky enough to do that, and don't get me wrong, if you're investing smart and you're buying, you learn how to find something that's undervalued, and you have a thesis. Like, let's say, for example, you find a great company, it's got a lot of potential, the markets don't care about it right now. Maybe they're producing a commodity that you think, because you've analyzed the sector, is going to be in real need in 2, 3, 4 years. So you buy this little company, and that company could easily.
Oh no, bro, you're freezing up hardcore. Gremlins got you, bro. Jethro, it takes a while to learn how to be a gardener. Yes, it really does.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, I think sometimes I've it said there was an issue with the connection, but yeah. So that shall I pick up where I left off? Are we okay to just continue?
Yeah, where you were saying that about if you find a company that you really want to invest in and you think that it's going to be profitable in 3 or 4 years. That's where we lost you.
Yeah. So you can do that, and if you've got a good idea about that company, let's say it's producing a commodity that you think the world really is going to need, there's going to be a shortage, you've done your analysis, then you're putting in all this hard work, and then you're putting your money there, and that hard work will pay off, because at some point, if you got it right and if you was good at your analysis, that will pay off in the future, and you could get 400%, 500%. It happens. Sometimes it's 20%, sometimes it's 50%. The goal is just not to lose, and that over time you continually add and compound that wealth. You'll see those increases, and then you'll hopefully convert it into something, whether it's gold, silver, property, whatever it is. And then there's the people who think that you put your money into something, and in 3 weeks' time you've got $1 million. You put $2,000 in, and you've got $1 million. And they hear the stories and they seek that, and that rarely, if ever, happens. And when it does happen, usually that person was just like a 1 in 100 million shot. They got lucky, and then they lose it all. And the reason they lose it all, Ryder, is because it's kind of like driving your car at 150 miles an hour. You've lost all risk management. You don't know what you're doing. You're just living for the thrill. You can get away with it once, but if that's your modus operandi, you're eventually going to wipe out, and that's usually what happens. So it's always a case of the slow and steady does win the race. And there's a great book if you want to learn a little bit more about the fast life in investing. It's called Market Wizards, and what's the name? Schwarger, I think it's called, or Swager. But Market Wizards won. And what you find is the traders, the people who really excel at trading, they have a high tolerance for risk, but also oftentimes they'll go bankrupt and wipe themselves out 4 or 5 times before they eventually get there. They have to be persistent, and usually they have a lot of suffering first. Oftentimes they have marriage breakdowns and family members disown them, and then usually they get there in the end. And that's because, the high risk game has, live by the sword, die by the sword. And for everyone that makes it as a high risk trader, there'll be thousands of others that, end up depressed and probably working at McDonald's. So I always advocate for people, just learn the fundamentals, learn the basics. Value investing is still extremely powerful if you know how to do it, because essentially what it is, Ryder, it's about finding something that's really cheap, that's undervalued, and then waiting for the people to realize that they overlooked it. And if you get good at that, you can do it consistently. And when you do something consistently and it's repeatable, then you've got the makings of long-term.
Yeah, long-term success. That makes sense. And I think that there's a really big issue with people that they don't have the patience to wait on something going up. Like, because I think a lot of people that are investing, and I've ran into it as well, because I invested a lot back in, like, before 2020, And then, that whole thing happened, and then I needed to get out of it. So I took a really big loss on that because I needed that extra money. And but if I would have left it in there, I would have a lot of money right now, because it's like, 5 years later. And what I had on that before has now gone through the roof. But I took a loss on it 5 years ago because I needed the money out of there. So I think
Yeah, and that
that is
happens
all.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if like you bought something like really cheap and you just like sat on it, like really no matter what it is, it's eventually going to go up, right? It's not like it's not like it's going to just completely go away, right? Like if you buy something really cheap, it's going to eventually go up at some point. You just don't know when it's going to go up.
A really good example is oil in 2020 when the world went into this big slowdown. And then what you saw was the future price of oil actually went negative for a time. Now, it didn't mean you could you could get given oil for free. But what it meant is that the world was anticipating there was such a slowdown that on these futures contracts, they all started to collapse. So if you was looking at oil companies back then, you could buy them at, 15, 20-year lows. And at that point, you just take a step back and you say, well, what's the most used commodity in the world? Oil. What can't we live without? Oil. Everything that I look around, when I look around this room, everything that I see requires oil. All of our transportation, everything. You can't live without it, Ryder. So is it really the case that we're not going to be using oil at the same rate in 3-4 years, that it's not going to bounce back? I mean, it was ludicrous what was happening. So in that instance, you are totally right. You just buy it and wait for the people to stop overreacting, because the markets are like human beings in general. They are extreme in their overreaction. So when there's good news, let's say, for example, Trump mentions Bitcoin, Elon mentions Pepe coin, then all of a sudden everyone dives into it, and it's like a schizophrenia to the hyper optimism. And then a few days later, it fades because people realize they overreacted. And it's the same with negative information. Okay, we're locking down. You can't go to Starbucks, whatever it is. Okay, but the world's not going to cease. We're still going to move around. Goods still have to go around the world. People still have to feed themselves. Oil's not going to disappear. And even with these narratives around climate change, we're still going to be using oil for decades and decades and decades. In fact, I don't think we'll ever stop using oil, Ryder. So I just think, the
Certainly
market's
not in our lifetime. Certainly not in our
No
lifetime.
way.
Yeah.
No way. And that's it. So I think the real art of investing is actually just to have a clear head and not to get too hyped on the up and not to get too depressed on the down, and also to use the masses and their psychology as your barometer of what not to do. Kind of do the inverse of other people. If everyone's talking about something, then who are you going to sell it to? You actually want to buy something before everyone's talking about it and sell it to them when everyone's talking about it, because that's usually when the last few buys are there. And at that point, there's only one way for it to go, which is down. So I mean, this is just me and my personal viewpoint, but I think, try and buy stuff that people ain't speaking about. When people have had enough of it, that's when to start looking at a sector. And yeah, I've never known that. I mean, it's the lowest risk way of investing. You're less likely to get burned that way.
So what do we think about cryptocurrency just in general as a form of currency? Do you invest in crypto at all?
No, I think it always comes down to having a clear view of, investment, speculation, and wealth preservation, and knowing the difference. Wealth preservation is to protect yourself from inflation, to protect yourself from confiscation, currency collapse. So that might be gold, for example. It's universally accepted. It pretty much keeps up with inflation. If you woke up tomorrow and the currency was deleted, they said the dollar's worthless, it's hyperinflated, whatever, your gold would survive, and you could essentially turn it into any other currency. It's like the king of money. So that's a wealth preserver. Then you've got investments, which is where, like I said, you do the research and you have a thesis, and it's something you can buy and hold. And then you've got speculations, which is where nobody knows what's going to happen with them. The risks are high, very volatile. It could go to zero, or it could make you rich. And I think cryptos mainly fall into that category. In fact, I'd say all of them do, even Bitcoin. That's my personal take. So if I was going to use them, it would be for a kind of sophisticated gambling. Like, can I can I outwit the everyday person buying these things? Which isn't too hard because the everyday person is just going to follow narratives. So I guess, but I don't personally mess around with cryptos. I've never been that interested in it. I've got a few just simple rules, buy stuff that you enjoy or are interested in, something that you want to learn about, something you can get passionate about. You don't have to love it, but for me, commodities, for example, I find it interesting. I like to look at how do you build a mine? What's the capacity of it? I don't mind looking into that stuff, whereas cryptos and technology just isn't my thing. So I avoid it. I know people have, earned a lot of money through it. It's through speculation. People who bought Bitcoin when it was really cheap and just held on to it. So I've got nothing against it, but I certainly don't think it's here to benefit society. Like Bitcoin even, I think it's probably there to ultimately take us towards central bank digital currencies and technocracy. I think the whole space has been artificially pumped and built out over the last 15 years. And the arc of the narrative from it being like a rebel asset against the state to now being adopted by the state, I think it's all by design. So I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist when it comes to that. I don't think they ever were worried by Bitcoin. I think all along it was used as the catalyst to take us towards a more technocratic digital system. And now, Ryder, all the infrastructure is there. The president's pumping it. And all it's going to take is for that switch to be flipped. And what you might find is that Bitcoin eventually has the rug pulled on it. And yet all of the infrastructure remains. And guess what? They're going to use it. And they're going to create CBDCs on the back of it. Maybe they'll give you a decentralized looking version. But ultimately, I think they can probably already do a pretty good job of triangulating who's who on the blockchain. Blockchain analytics, they've become very sophisticated at. Most people would say now Bitcoin really isn't that private. You could maybe go to Monero or something like that. So I'd say treat them as speculations. Certainly don't trust them for your financial privacy. I think for that, you want to be looking at hard assets, I'd say, is probably the best thing for financial privacy.
So you think Bitcoin is going to end up collapsing and then they're going to roll out a new coin on top of the infrastructure of Bitcoin? Because this is a thing that people have been talking about for a really long time, that the dollar is going to 100% collapse. It's going to be valueless. And then we're going to go to a digital currency. And you don't think that that's going to be Bitcoin, or is it going to be Bitcoin for a certain period of time? I mean, we know that a lot of the U.S. banks, there's been reports that the U.S. banks has the infrastructure for using XRP for all of their stuff for a really long time. They've had that infrastructure, I think, since like 2020. They've been working on that and had that infrastructure for XRP, and this switch from the regular dollar to this XRP dollar. And that was Bank of America. I heard the president of Bank of America talk about how that their infrastructure that they're working on is going to be backed by XRP. So unless she's lying, or unless it's switched since 4 or 5 years ago, then that seems to be the direction that they're going.
Yeah, I think right now XRP is being used in 9 different central bank digital currency trials. So it's certainly one of the preferred ones. Now, the reason why they're all of a sudden U-turning on Bitcoin is, firstly, it doesn't pose a threat to them. And secondly, because they're using it to backstop US debt. And the way they're doing that is through stable coins like Tether. And what's happening is over 50% of all transactions of Bitcoin use Tether. So 50% just using one stable coin. And a stable coin, for listeners that don't know, is a form of cryptocurrency that is supposedly backed one-to-one with another currency that we actually use in day-to-day transactions like the dollar. So Tether say that for every one Tether, there is a dollar-backed reserve in their reserves. But no one's ever audited them, so we don't know. They could essentially be printing money. And the reason
this almost sounds like the Federal Reserve. For every dollar we have that in gold, and there's nothing in the Federal Reserve.
It's just the same. It's like a private company. But what happened is because Tether's used so frequently when it comes to Bitcoin transactions, it's intimately linked to it. Because what most people do, the big investment firms or traders, is they'll pack their money in Tether, and then when they want to leave Bitcoin, they'll put it into Tether, and then they'll go back from Tether to Bitcoin because it's more efficient and they don't have to pay fees by getting that Bitcoin out into a bank, because it's actually quite expensive to get Bitcoin out, and it's a laborsome process. But to just convert from Bitcoin to Tether is easy. Also, Tether's being used in a lot of third world countries, second world countries that have dodgy currencies. So it's expanded massively. It's the most used coin in the world. It's not Bitcoin, it's Tether. And what Tether do is whenever they increase their profits, is they will then cycle that into US treasuries, which is US debt. So you can see here how the whole crypto space now is intimately linked with US debt, because as these stable coins, and it's not just Tether, there's about 4 or 5 other major ones, including XRP. I think the Ripple Labs people, they've got a stable coin coming out next year, and they're all putting their reserves into US debt. So you can see for the US and the government, this is extremely useful, because all of these other nations, China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, none of them actually want to hold US debt anymore. They're actually cycling out of US treasuries and going into gold, because they no longer trust the US. And they probably think long term the dollar is going to die, which is precisely what you said. Even European banks now, if you look at, for example, Poland or Hungary and Czech Republic, they're buying a lot of gold. So it's like all the central banks are preparing for the end of the current system. They're not going to Bitcoin, they're going to gold. China is going to gold. Russia has extremely large gold reserves. So the US is stuck. How are we going to fund ourselves? How are we going to keep this Ponzi scheme going? Aha, cryptocurrencies. And by pushing Bitcoin onto the masses now, the more people that go into Bitcoin, the higher the reserves of these stable coins will go, because they move in tandem. So if you look at the price of Bitcoin going up, the reserves of Tether go up and all the other ones, and then they can buy more US debt. So it's this kind of toxic debt cycle. So it's kind of sad, kind of cynical. Of course, people in the Bitcoin community don't like to speak about it. It's a bit of a dirty secret. But, you know, if you look at the Tennessee Bitcoin conference from 2024 and just watch that speech from Howard Lutnick, who is Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce, he literally tells you in it, the reason why I'm here is because of Tether and for US debt. We need to backstop this US debt and keep the Americans' lifestyle artificially inflated, because of course America exports its inflation by having the reserve currency. So that's a long way of saying that no, I don't think it's for the good of the people. I think it's for the continuance of the Federal Reserve System, which is kind of the antithesis of what Bitcoin was meant to be. And in the end game, what I imagine happens because of that is that at some point they'll have all of the dominoes set up, ready for the central bank digital currency. They'll knock it down. They'll pull the rug on Bitcoin. I don't think it will be in the next monetary system, which I think maybe is, I don't know, maybe by 2030 we get there. Or maybe they do continue to use it, Ryder. Maybe they allow you to have a wallet that's centrally controlled. So maybe you have to have a wallet at your bank. You can still have your Bitcoin in there. You can have your XRP, whatever you want, but they'll still have oversight because they'll control the superstructure around these assets. That's another potential outcome, in which case the Bitcoin narrative won't be so sexy anymore, because it won't be going up tens of thousands of percent at that point. It will just be another asset. So that's my take.
What would be the advantages of having Tether, investing in Tether coin, other than to exchange out your Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies? Does it hold as like a, I guess you could invest in it to protect your like regular assets, like maybe to protect your purchasing power that you already have in there, I guess would be the only benefit. And then I guess you saying that it could double because it's a 1-for-1 right now. What if it becomes like a 2-for-1?
Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows what it is. They say it's a 1-for-1, but they have consistently refused to audit themselves. And there was a lot of speculation. There was some studies done by economists who were saying, listen, we don't actually trust this company. If you look into the background, they've had a lot of legal cases brought against them. And they always promise that we will do a full audit to show you that we're backed, because if they're not backed, Ryder, then it's a scam, right? It's a Ponzi scheme. They're pretending they've got reserves. They're issuing something that can function as a dollar. Like you can issue, for example, they can issue 1 million Tether tomorrow and use it to buy real assets, including Bitcoin. And this was the accusation against them, that they were minting Tether that was not backed by real dollars. I say real dollars. The dollars are fictional anyways, but it wasn't backed by actual dollars. And they were using it to pump up the Bitcoin price and then cycling from Tether to Bitcoin and then back to Tether or back to actual real dollars and, you know, putting into their reserves. And nobody can prove one way or another because they refuse to be audited. They just they basically fired their own auditor. When they did try to audit themselves, they might have not liked what they saw because they fired him and the audit never came. So what they actually released now is something called an attestation, which is basically a piece of paper that says, we promise you we've got these reserves. And you know, by now maybe they are actually squeaky clean. I don't know, because at this point they've earned so much. I think this year alone they earned something like 15 billion, I want to say, in a single year. So at that point, Ryder, they can probably actually become a legitimate enterprise, but they have to now serve the US empire by buying lots of US debt. So that's the kind of changing shape of Tether. And the reason people would use them is because it acts like a dollar, but it's a digital dollar. So people, like I said, who are buying and selling Bitcoin, they don't want to pull their money out and put it into a bank because of the fees and the time cost. So they just go into Tether, which is essentially a free trade, and then they can immediately at any point click the button and get back into Bitcoin or any other asset. So it's very useful. And the other one is all of these people in countries like Argentina, lots of the countries in Latin America have very high inflation rates and bad currencies. So for those people, again, they can't get access to dollars a lot of the time because their country will confiscate dollars sometimes. You know, in Argentina, there's been numerous times where people had dollar-denominated bank accounts, and the state said, well, we've got debts in dollars, we're just going to steal it from you guys, and they've done that. It happened not so long back in, I want to say, Lebanon. Yeah, Lebanon did this recently. They stole everyone's dollar bank accounts. So those people want the dollar, but because they can't get the actual US physical dollar or a bank account in dollars, they'll buy Tether now because it's universal. So again, it acts as a dollar, but whether it's a legitimate one, that at some point, who knows, maybe at some point, like you said, they say, actually, we don't have the reserves, and then it's more of an Enron. It's a Bernie Madoff. It just falls apart. And that would bring down Bitcoin with it too, because of its high correlation with Bitcoin. Like I said, I think it's something like 60% of all Bitcoin transactions involve Tether. So if Tether goes, you better believe Bitcoin's going to fall a bit as well.
So they would essentially, so if you bought a bunch of Tether, there's no guarantee that can't even speak, that Tether is backed by any kind of real reserve. So wouldn't you be able to like buy something else with it, and then that wouldn't be, then that other cryptocurrency or that other exchange would be backed by, so then it would technically be legitimate, right? Because if you just say you invested, I don't know, whatever the Bitcoin running price is right now, which I think is like 95,000 in that rough area. So let's say you bought $95,000 worth of Tether, and then you transferred that into Bitcoin, and then you got that Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is Bitcoin. So then you would actually have the money in Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, the Tether, whilst, you know, for now it functions just like a dollar. You buy, you know, $95,000 worth, and there you go. You've got $95,000 because people will accept it. The only time that would fall apart is if confidence was lost in Tether and people thought it wasn't backed, which is what the suggestion was for a lot of years. And yeah, that's the problem with all of these things. It's all trust-based. You know, the dollar, the actual dollar is trust-based. The Japanese yen is trust-based. They're all trust-based systems. And your counterparty is the US government if you have the dollar, or it's the British government if you've got the pound. In this instance, it's a private company that trades out of the Cayman Islands. So that's your counterparty who have refused to audit themselves for a long time. So it's even riskier than the dollar, right? Because it's just a private company. You know, they can pull the plug on themselves at some point if they want to and leave you high and dry. So counterparties are always critical in anything in life. And in this instance, do you want to trust a company that refuses to audit itself, isn't regulated, and is based out of the Cayman Islands purposely to avoid as much regulation as possible? I don't know. Doesn't seem like a good place to store your wealth for a long period of time, put it that way.
Sounds like Haktua girl. She made that coin and then pulled the rug on the coin, and people lost like millions of dollars. But speaking of the debt here, the United States Federal Reserve is $36.8 trillion in debt. Now, Trump says that he's going to get this debt down by a lot, but I don't understand how that's going to happen. I don't think the system has been made for us to actually pay off this debt at all. I mean, $36.18 trillion in debt. I mean, how much is your country in debt, Mike?
In Great Britain, I think it's around coming up to 3 trillion.
Holy crap. That's wild. So what do we do about this debt? Like what can be done about it? I mean, it seems like that it's inevitably going to collapse. Now, people have said several times over and over and over again for many years that the Fed is going to be no more, that the Fed is going to be destroyed. No longer have to pay income tax. It's all going to come down. The dollar is going to collapse. And then every single year that people say that, it tends to never happen. We just keep trucking along. We keep artificially inflating it up, and we keep, going down this road of, this currency that is, just printing more money and accumulating more debt and more debt. So, how do you see us getting out of this? Is it going to eventually collapse at some point? And if it does, when do you think that it would happen?
Well, let's start with what we do know. We know that historically every currency, bar none, has collapsed, and that there is no such thing as infinitely expanding debt, because right now the US's second biggest expenditure is debt interest. So, and that's just paying the interest. And at some point, your country will collapse. America will collapse because of the amount of debt. Because where they're going to raise that money from? Well, it's going to be from you in taxation. It's going to be predatory taxation. It's going to be theft of assets of the citizens. And then at some point, they'll just say, well, we can't pay it at all. And, you can only go out and loot so many other countries and go to war so many times before you have to stop doing that because you can't afford it. The US spends more on its military than the next top 10 countries combined. Social Security and Medicare are due to run out in 2030. So what about all those people that were promised healthcare? If it runs out of money in 2030, where does the money come from? And then you've got other problems like pensions. Pensions in the US are underfunded by, I think it's around 100 trillion. So what's going to happen when those people retire? So I guess my point is we're living on borrowed time here. It's a lot of promises, and they have become they've done a great job of kicking the can down the road. We've got to give that to them. 2008, people thought that was the end. They said, oh, it's the end. And then they came up with quantitative easing. They took interest rates to 5,000-year lows, which was kind of unprecedented. And what that did was that allowed people to buy assets essentially for free. They didn't have to pay any interest on the money they was borrowing. So that created these big bubbles in housing, the stock market. But then the problem is when you do that, what happens when you have slow growth? What happens when you have an economic downturn? Well, those asset bubbles collapse. And when that superstructure around it is a debt-based system, then it brings everything down. You have a debt collapse. And then you go into a Great Depression, which is what happened in 1929. We had 10 years of artificial growth with low interest rates, easy money, people buying things on debt. And then you had a crash. And in 1929, the crash, it led to a 90% decline in the stock market. Just under, it was 89.5. And then it took 25 years just to break even from where it was in 1929. 25 years just to get back to where you was in 1929. So the problem is, if that happened now, Ryder, it would bring down everything, because we don't live in a fragmented world where what happens in America doesn't affect somebody in New Zealand, or what happens in Japan doesn't affect somebody in Australia. All of it's interlinked. We've got a whole system, everyone indebted, everyone using fiat money. So you can see they're in a rock and a hard place situation. They've kind of got to perpetuate it as long as possible, because the ramifications of it stopping would be world shaking. Now, the reason why I think we've got the world looking so messy right now is they are at the end of the road. They are in desperation, which is why I think 2020 happened. They needed to print a lot of money to bail out the system. So we're kind of living in this era where we're just going to lurch from crisis to give them the mandate to print more money, to prop up the system, not for another 10 years. It's going to be for another 2 years, another 3 years. Then you're going to need another massive injection of money. And then there's going to be another crisis to justify that. But the problem is, what's that doing to us, the little guy? Well, it's destroying us with inflation. You get 20% inflation. So long gone are the days where, okay, it's getting harder to live. It costs a little bit more for my weekly shop. The energy bills are going up, by 10% this year. And it's like, no, it's like 50% a year now, your costs. And the problem is your boss, your employer, they ain't going to give you a pay rise of 50% a year. So you can see it's tightening the screws on everyone now. And that's leading to a very hostile society, a very envious society. And it's also turning people into hyper materialists where they think, YOLO, just have fun staying poor. I'm going to get rich, OnlyFans, earn $1 million a year, buy this shit coin and go to $1 trillion. That's the kind of mindset it breeds in people, rather than that mindset we was talking about getting married, raising a family, having a plot of land, saving for a rainy day. Those kind of values are disappearing. And I think it's having a catastrophic effect on the world. It's going to lead to more war. It's going to lead to resource wars as these big nations like the US and China fight for a bigger slice of the cake just to keep their own section of the Ponzi system going. And the crazy thing is we're living through it, and it's happening before our very eyes. And most people they're not reading it from this script. They think that these things are happening for all these other reasons. It's like, no, it's happening because of the debt-based system, in my opinion. And I think we've got tough times ahead, which is why, I'm kind of counter-cyclical. I think the things we should be doing now is just considering those things that I said. Medicare fails in 2030, 2032. Okay, maybe you're not going to have access to a good, at least decent and functional healthcare system in the next 15 years. So you might want to get into shape. You might want to start to look into some homeopathy or natural health. What about food prices, right? They go up 30% a year, 50% a year. Maybe you want to grow a bit of food. Maybe you want to think about that, because they might give you food, Ryder, but maybe you don't want to eat the food they're going to give you. Maybe the quality is going to collapse. Did you see that video recently of the guy filming from inside that food place where they were crushing up crap for pigs to eat? Did you see that one with all the plastic packaging? And
No, I didn't see that, but it's for a fact that plastic is in like all of our food. It's in the meat, it's in the vegetables. I mean, there was a lady that I listened to, I think on Rogan's podcast, where she was saying that, the average American eats a credit card worth of plastic every week in the United States.
Yeah, this I totally believe it. This guy worked in a processing plant where there was a big crusher, a grinder, he called it. And what they did was they would collect all the waste food from supermarkets, so packets of bread, packets of cookies, biscuits, and they weren't emptying them from the packets. They was throwing it all onto a conveyor belt. It would go up into the grinder and turn it into a powder. All the plastic, all of the crap, moldy food, everything. And then the pigs would eat that. And it's legal. It's legal in the US. Now, he made a video of it and he got fired the next day because it went viral. So he lost his job. But my point is, we are being assaulted on all fronts, not just financially, our health, our psychological health, our relationships, everything. So it's one of those times in history, and we've had them before, but I don't think we've ever had them on this scale, but we have had them before, where you just have to be very careful. You have to take back control where you can. And I think, you probably don't want to find yourself amongst the masses. Whatever the people are doing at the mean, I would say go the other way from that, and you'll probably have a better outcome. That's my take on it.
Do you think that stock trading and the financial system is going to be affected by the implementation of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's been a huge narrative, and this is how the stock market really works. The reason why we have these big waves in the stock market is because of technology. Like if you go back to the 1700s, we had a massive bubble in canal companies. In the 1800s, it was railway companies, and they always have a massive bubble. So whenever you get a new technology, it gets the world excited. It's like, wow, this is going to change the world, Ryder, everything's going to change, my friend. And if you ain't on board, then you're going to lose. You're going to go poor. Have fun staying poor, Ryder. You didn't buy this railway stock. And then it was the automobile stocks, and then it was the information technology. Remember the dot-com bubble? There was companies coming onto the market. Pets.com never earned a penny, and it was valued at tens of billions. And then it went bankrupt a few years later. And there was many like that. And it's the same with cryptos. Ryder, it's going to change the world. All these coins, buy yourself some Pepe coin, whatever it is. And every new technology has a big bubble, a big speculative bubble. Now, that's actually done on purpose. And the reason it's done on purpose is to build out that infrastructure around the technology so it can be then co-opted later on. And they don't want to pay for it. The state doesn't want to pay for it. They want us to pay for it with our hard-earned money. They want these private companies to come along and do it. So, for example, with the dot-com bubble, they wanted to expand broadband everywhere. They wanted all this new cabling. So they deregulated the space, allowed anyone to create a telecommunications company, really pumped it in the media, created a big mania around it, and all of the technology got built out. And then, of course, the bubble collapses and everyone goes poor. But
and then there's only a couple of companies left at the end of that.
Exactly. They consolidate all the power then in their key players. And the same thing's going to happen with AI. So right now we're in that space where, that phase where they're trying to build it up, build the narrative, get everyone excited. But I don't see AI really changing our lives at all for the next 10, 15 years. I think it's all hype. It will certainly have big impacts down the line. But what's actually happening now, I think, is they're just allowing it to be deregulated and they're making it very easy to access so that we can help train it, we can help improve it. And the next industrial revolution, which they call the fourth industrial revolution, is the one that comes after the information technology boom, which started, let's say, in the 1970s, and it reached its nadir in the 2000s. And now we're in that gap period where you have a massive depression because it takes about another 50 years to get up to speed with the next technology. We've kind of exhausted the old technology. The new technology is going to be mRNA, nanotechnology, AI, transhumanism. But if you look around, Ryder, it's a lot of big narratives, but it's going to take about 20, 30 years before this stuff is really integrated into the world. So what we're actually going to see is collapse. We're not going to see this city of the future and smart cities, what they keep pumping in the media. One day, maybe 50 years, you'll see a smart city. But what you'll actually see in your lifetime and my lifetime is collapse, disintegration. We'll see the old systems die away. We'll see them fall and crumble apart, and we'll help them fall apart. They'll give us narratives to help bring those systems down. And by the time me and you are sat here with gray hair, I've already got a few in my beard. Right,
I do too. I'm getting there. I'm getting there right there with you, brother.
But by the time me and you are sat here, maybe we'll be sat here in 30 years. We'll still be doing our shows. We might start to see the first inklings of that future world that they're promising, but I think we'll have lived through a lot of collapse and disintegration before we get to this renewal. And that's just a sad fact of life. We're going through a winter. The winter is the period where everything starts to die off, and the spring is a long way away. I think 2050 is probably where the spring comes in. So I
what did Biden say in 2020? What did he say? It was a dark winter. You prepare for a dark winter or something like that. I think that's what he said.
I don't know if I said that. Did I say that?
No, Biden, President Biden, I think said that
Biden.
in 2020.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be surprised. He was arcing back to dark winter, that scenario as well. But yeah, I think that's what it's going to be. And when you look around the world, that's definitely what we're seeing. Like, it takes a long time to build a society. It doesn't take long to destroy it, but it takes many, many centuries to actually really build out a culture and a society and shared values and principles, but it can be destroyed really quickly. And I think if you look at, say, the fall of the Soviet Empire, that's probably more what America will be like, a more powerful version. It's not going to be the same, but I think the standard of living for Americans will go down. And, Trump might come in and he might do a few positive things on, for the next few years, but I think the long-term trajectory is kind of impossible to change now, because some of the problems that we're facing in the West are systemic, and they've been around now. They've been festering like a wound for, let's say, 50, 60 years. Education, for example, you ain't fixing that in one generation. It would take a lot, because all those people who have been educated in this toxic system are now working in industry. They're now the CEOs. They're now the managers, the middle managers, the gatekeepers to the world. So tough times ahead, Ryder. Like I said, sit back and get the popcorn out.
Yeah, that's like what Yuri Bezmenov was talking about. I put that clip in the film that I sent you to watch, my film of Clockwork Shining, where he's talking about, if we just infiltrate the education systems, and then in 20, 30 years, those people that we indoctrinated with these beliefs and these ideas are going to be the people that are going to be running things. And yeah, that's a really tough one to tackle. And I think that a big one is like homeschooling. Like, you can literally get your child through, as long as it takes them to go through middle school, grade school, middle school, and high school. You can cram that all into 4 years. Kids could literally be graduating and get all the education that they need by the time that they're like 12, 13 years old.
Oh yeah.
Like, why are we
100%.
not doing that? I think everyone
Yeah.
should be doing that.
Yeah, and just think of all of the things that they would miss out on that will rot their brain, rot their health, give them mental health issues, all of the toxic mess that exists in a school, the indoctrination, the exposure, overexposure to technology, being around other children that are also exposed to that. So creating, this culture that's going to be lesser and lesser with each passing generation. It's sad, but I think, like I said earlier, if you want to do well and if you want your child to do well, you have to move away from the mean. The mean's getting worse and worse. Now, the great news about that is for you to look like a superhero, you're not going to have to do a lot. Just keep yourself in good shape and you're going to be like a Superman compared to Fat Slob Joe, who, can't bend down to tie his own shoelaces at 20. And that's kind of the average now. It's going to look worse and worse. And I don't say that with glee, but I do think, to stand out in this world today, it's not going to be that difficult because there's a lot of people who are succumbing to this. It's not just laziness of body, it's laziness of thought as well. Lack of critical thinking, no longer desiring to have self-responsibility. They're shirking their responsibility as a human. They want someone to come and fix it. They're looking for a hero. We're seeing that now with Donald Trump. Okay, you might like Trump, but he's not a hero and he's not coming to fix things for you. Neither is Elon Musk. They've got ties to a system and they're not going to betray that system entirely because they live in the system, so you've got to take personal responsibility in all of this too. Even if somebody comes along that promises you some stuff that you agree with and you like and you think they sound good, at some point they'll get voted out and somebody else will come along. Your life's not going to change because of a politician. It will change because you actually take control of it. You decide, whatever happens over there, I'm going to take care of business here. I'm going to make my life better, my family's life better. I'm going to build a community. And I'm also going to have self-discipline to not go down the path of toxic food and, constantly living in psyops and social media and all that stuff. It's hard, Ryder, because it's there to tempt us, right? It's there to keep us confused, dazed, and dumb. So you have to really want to not be a part of that to take control of your life.
You said that beautifully. And I think social media has gotten to this point and to this degree that people would, they're constantly trying to one up themselves, and they're looking for likes, and they're wanting people to, say that they're the best and that they're great and all that, which does feel good. I mean, I definitely enjoy that as well, but it's like we've built our entire society around social media, and real life has started to become social media. Like, the way that people interact with each other has become like how people interact with each other on social media. It's so
It is.
strange. It's the strangest thing. Like, they can, not have any manners. They can just, like how you can ignore people on social media. You can just not read their comments. You can not read what they're saying. You can just post and get off, which is a really great thing to do. But in real life, people are more rude. They're not considerate of you. They're not considerate of your space. They don't really even like look at you. They're always kind of looking down. They're on their phone, or they're not even having a conversation. They don't say hi. They don't say hello.
You see,
This inner world of social media has expanded to the outer world of reality, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, You see at the supermarket, people actually, young people especially, they don't want to go to a checkout with a human being. They'd rather spend longer and use the robot machine so they don't have to have that small little interaction with another person. They don't have to look at somebody in the eye. And vice versa. You know, sometimes you go to a checkout and the woman's on a headset. She doesn't even look at you. We are losing those day-to-day interactions and human connections that make life worth living. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to live in a world where people don't interact. And women, you know, we might say, oh, you know, small talk. What use is it? It's pointless. No, it does have a use. I think what it's about is about creating a feeling of comfort, a feeling of community, a feeling of connection with one another. And I think if you take that away, you've got a soulless world. And I think that's the world they probably want, is a soulless world. A transhuman is something without a soul, isn't it? You know, that's what they're trying to take from us, is this compassion, empathy, and you know, those words can be overused in today's society with the wokeism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just wanting to see each other succeed. You know, if I pass you on the street, like I'd rather you smile at me and say good morning than to frown at me or look down. I'm sure you'd feel the same, right? So we're kind of sleepwalking into a world that none of us want. Nobody wants that world, and yet that's the world that we are going into. And it's kind of like we need to put the brakes on somehow.
Yeah, and it's all about competition, right? It's about, you know, who's doing better, instead of building each other up and like patting each other on the back and working together to create something incredible and lift each other up. It's not that way with social media, and it's becoming not that way in real reality between social interactions. You know, like everyone seems like that they're 100% out for themselves, and they only want to do things that benefit them. And that's a really dangerous area to be in as a society. Like we have to sit back and help each other grow, you know? Like, you've had me on your show several times. I'm sure some of your listeners are over here, and now I'm having you on over here. So hopefully some of my listeners go over to your channel and see what you got going on over there. You know, that's the way that is supposed to work. And I'm going to support you because I like what you do. I think that you're a good person. You know, but so many people don't look at it that way. They want to be like, oh well, I don't want to have them on because I'm afraid that they're going to outshine me or that they're going to be better than me. It's like this constant competition between, and it's not just in this space, it's everywhere. It's with everything. And it's the opposite way of doing anything.
Yeah, it is. And you know, a healthy society would take drive and motivation and ambition, and it shapes it and molds it into something that's actually productive and useful. Like, there's nothing wrong with competition per se, but it's how you use it. Do you use it to try and advance yourself? When I look at somebody like, you know, in podcasting, like I'd look at a show like yours and say, wow, if that show's awesome. Like, the quality is so good. You know, he's a really good presenter. Like, how can I adapt myself? How can I raise myself? Raised by giants. There you go.
Raised by giants, baby.
That's the one. To get myself to a better level. Like, how can I use that? You know, how about I get Ryder on the show? I'll talk to him. I'll get to know that guy. Maybe he can, you know, just talking to that guy might help me. You know, that's how you should see life, right? We should try and elevate one another. Be kind, be friendly, give people a leg up. Of course, personal responsibility always. But I've always been like that. I don't know. I'm although I was an athlete, I was most competitive with myself. Like, other people were always just a catalyst for me to try and improve. Like, if I see somebody who's better, yeah, I want to get better than them. But I'm not against that person. I'm against me. Like, how do I elevate myself? And I don't know how we fix these things, Ryder. I wish I could tell you, but I think we've just got a very sick culture, unfortunately. And American culture was always about, I mean, the original cowboy culture of America was about pioneers, and it was about being a pioneer. It was building that homestead. It was providing for your family. It was doing things for oneself. But that ain't the America we've got today. It's not the Western society we've got today. What we've actually got is a lot of people who do want to live an easy life, and they want it handed to them on a plate. They want to get rich quick. They want to have a great you know, it's not about having a great family anymore. Even it's about, you know, having the somebody who looks the best, but maybe has nothing up there, doesn't never read a book in the life, you know, and then they wonder why the relationship fails after 4 or 5 years. It's sick culture, my friend, and we're trying our best. We're trying to give people some quality, and hopefully we've changed a few people's minds on some of these issues. Oh, I think you might be muted, Ryder.
Sometimes that happens. Probably every show that happens. But it seems like that instead of seeing someone that's better than you and learning to be better yourself and using them as like an uplifting type of thing, and make yourself better, make your show better, or make it whatever it is, because there's always going to be somebody better than you. You should look at them as something that you want to be, but instead we've turned that upside down. We've turned that into, well, I should just attack them. I should just criticize them, everything that they say. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if I agree with it or if I don't agree with it. I'm still going to, like, disagree no matter what, because I don't like them. What they're saying doesn't align with what I'm saying or what I believe or what I want them to say. That's like the worst type of one of the worst types of people, is the type of people that don't like you just because you don't say what they want you to say. And that's not just online, like that's just in general, like even in real life. Like I think that that's such a travesty to human connection.
It is, and you know, we live in a world where they push down our throat at every second these ideologies about diversity, but it's not about diversity, because they don't want diversity of opinion, right? They want conformity of opinion. You know, you can be anything you want, Ryder. You can call yourself a cat, you can call yourself a spaceman, whatever. You choose, but don't have a different opinion. You know, don't be confident either. You know, you can be fake confident, you can be alpha, but don't be confident in what you say. You know, don't have the foresight and the ability to back up what you say. You know, they don't like that. And communication skills are being destroyed. You know, I've got friends who go to university, professors, all kinds of people that I've met, and I'm seeing a lot of people, they really just don't have the capacity to accept an alternative view. And it's like, well, where does that come from? You know, is it education that's doing it? Is it the media? What they actually want is for us all to be at each other's throats. And they're being very successful at that. But I often find, you know, I get along with people on the left. I got along with people on the right. So long as we're not touching all of the topics that are hot topics. Like if I go to the mountains and there's somebody sat there in the big mountain hut and we're talking, where did you go? What did you do today? We have a great conversation. Doesn't matter what they believe about politics. It doesn't matter who they sleep with. I don't care. They don't care about me. We're not talking about that. But the problem is they've created a society where they're forcing us all to talk about these controversial issues. There used to be a rule: don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. That was the rule in common society to keep things coherent, because people lived in communities. And Ryder, if you live a few doors down from me, I can't afford to be arguing with you. You know why? Because we've got shit to do. You know, you might need some ladders. I might need some help one night. The hospital's not close. What if there's an emergency? I can't afford to have you as my enemy. It's too much stress. I'd rather have you as an ally. So I'm going to not touch those hot topics, and you're not going to. But because they've created this society where we all live online and we communicate anonymously, and you find this as a content creator, I'm sure you get some nasty people in those comment sections sometimes. I get emails, even like random emails from strangers trying to attack my belief structure because they heard me mention I'm a Christian or something. And I'm like, why would anyone even care about that? You know, why would you cold call a stranger and be like, Christ isn't real? You know what I mean? That's kind of like the equivalent of what sometimes I get. And like, it doesn't offend me as such because I've got thick skin. So I just block the person, because what does it matter to me? You know, that person's not going to add any value. So I get rid of them. But the point is, we are in a world where people have very low ethics and principles. And yeah, again, it goes back to what we said earlier. It's about these things are going to be very hard to fix at the mean. So it's going to take a long time for society to, I mean, they will bounce back at some point, Ryder, because we're on a pendulum and we're getting to one extreme, and it always goes back in the other direction with equal force to the extreme that it hit. So if it goes to, it's like a rubber band. The more you stretch it, the more it's going to twang back the other way. That will happen. But for now, I think for people like us, we just have to build smaller, more intimate communities where we have people that manage to avoid going down that path and support one another like we are doing now. You know, we go on each other's shows, keep a strong community, and don't lament the times that we're in, because we're still very lucky, I think, to live in these times. We still have a lot of privileges that our great grandparents didn't have. So I'm not complaining about that, but I think we do have to protect our peace of mind as well. And the best way to do that is just not get involved in the stuff that's toxic. Just stay away. You do you. You know, you keep doing what you're good at, and don't succumb, I think, is the key, because they're going to try and chip away at you as we go along.
Absolutely. And I don't think that it helps that the average IQ, I'm going to look up the average IQ in the US. I think it's very low. Average IQ by state and country. This is breaking down all of the states. I don't want this, but I think that it's really low. It's a very low average IQ in the United States, and that really doesn't help either, because that's where your common sense and your critical thinking, you know, comes from. And that's where that kicks in. But you're completely right in saying that people don't want they want the outrage. They want the outrage because the outrage promotes interaction, especially on social media. So you wouldn't go to a Buddhist monk and tell the Buddhist monk in person in the face that Buddha isn't real. Just like I wouldn't randomly come up to you and say that Jesus never existed, though it's debatable, right? But I'm not ever going to come up to you and be like, oh, hey, guess what? Everything you believe is wrong. But they do that on social media because it's outrage. And that's what drives the comments. That's what drives the clicks. And that's what drives the interaction. And again, that type of thing is bleeding over into real life interactions. And that's where you get those types of interactions. Like, it wouldn't surprise me, because I had an instance that happened the other day when I was in the sauna. I think I talked to, well, it wasn't the other day. It was, I don't know, a month or so ago. I think I mentioned it before. But I was in the sauna and this guy just like kept going on about Jesus. Like, and I'm the only person in there. And obviously he's, profiling me because I have a lot of tattoos and stuff. And I'm in there with my shirt off. He was like, do you believe in Jesus? Jesus is the savior. And like randomly, just randomly out of the blue, like start singing all this stuff. And I was like, dude, I got Jesus tattooed right here on my arm. And he kept going on and on and on about it. And I'm like, dude, religion is fine. You can have religion. You can believe whatever it is that you want to believe. I got no problems with you. But it's sort of like having a penis, right? Religion is like having a penis. It's perfectly okay to have a penis. Good for you for having a penis. But if you whip it out and start waving it around in front of everyone, then we're going to have a problem. And it got to that type of interaction because I'm very knowledgeable about Christianity. I don't believe that it's the way that it's portrayed. I believe that it's something completely different, and it's coded, and it's more than likely astrological. And I just went at him, and he just wouldn't give up. And I'm like, dude, like, why would you think that that's okay to do? Like, you're going to come at me because you think that I'm not living up to your standards? Is that not judgment? Is that not what Jesus and God said not to do, not to judge other people? It's very hypocritical. But those interactions are bleeding over into real life.
Yeah, and it's about everything. That's it. It's about every single facet of life. They've created almost. It's like if you imagine our life as a piece of glass, they've just shattered it, and every single fragment is something to be argued over. And there's a lot of fragments out there. This everything is a hot topic these days, and the way that I deal with that, Ryder, is I don't know who said it. It certainly isn't my expression. It was somebody who said, sometimes you have to retreat to the citadel of the mind, which is just go inwards. Up here, I can have free speech. Up here, I can think and say and do what I want. And I can be my own company. I can read a book. I can talk to my wife. She's not going to worry about what I say. I can have an open conversation. But I certainly don't feel the need to express myself. I mean, I'm a podcaster, right? So I'm expressing myself to the world, essentially. But my audience is my audience. They'll listen to me. Whoever wants to listen. If you don't, then you turn off. What I don't need is somebody who is going to downvote every video and criticize it. It's like, you're not adding value. If you don't like it, don't watch it. There's millions of other podcasts. There's millions of other people out there to listen to. Listen to yourself, record yourself, and listen back every night. You might really enjoy that if that's the kind of person you are. If you're a narcissist, you might love that. But for me, yeah, I'm really good at tuning out from that stuff because, with life's really too short, my friend. To care. Like that guy in the sauna, right? Why does he think you care? I mean, why does he think anyone cares? Like, there's nothing wrong with a conversation.
That was my point. That's what I was arguing with him about.
If you're going to give, you better take two, right? If someone, I don't mind debating anything with somebody, and I can do it with zero ill will or bad feelings, but a lot of people can't. So I've learned also, if somebody's very strongly opinionated, don't just think because they come at you like that they're going to be able to enjoy or participate in a debate with you coming back at them the other way. So, a lot of the times in life today, I just say, I'm going to let this one pass me by. Like, if you want to talk about that, you talk about that. I'll sit here and nod my head, and I'll retreat to the citadel of the mind, and up there I'll be doing whatever I want to do, because I just don't think it's helping us either to get into these massive debates and arguments and conversations. Sometimes it's good to challenge someone. I'm not saying that. We do have to challenge one another, and sometimes it's good to make someone think and reflect. But I think we have to think about how we do it too. Getting into a shouting match with someone's not helping anyone, least of all them. But if you can drop something that makes someone think and give them pause, if we can be a little bit more creative in how we do it, that's probably the best we can do for those people. And it still leaves open the door, I guess, for future interaction with someone, because you might see him again in the sauna. You don't want to have a bad, you don't want to be in the sauna with the guy who you had the argument with. So I totally get that. I go to the sauna a lot too. And, when I was in the UK, I used to go to the sauna, and all of the people in that sauna were old ex-miners in like the 70s and 80s. So, when I was in that sauna, I was chatting about what ex-miners chat about. Whatever they're talking about, that's what I'm talking about, because that was the culture there. So that's what I did. I wasn't there telling them about what I do because they weren't interested. So I'm adaptable, Ryder. I'll take life as it comes.
That's the thing too, is like when I'm in the sauna, like I like to, because I don't take my phone in there. Several people take their phone in the sauna. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, it's
Really?
just going to ruin your phone. Yeah, here in the United States, all the gyms and the saunas that I've been to, I've been in a few of them. In several
Is this like a
places.
Finnish sauna, like with the heat, or is it like an infrared?
They'll take them in the steam room. They'll take them in the sauna.
Wow.
They'll take them anywhere because they're addicted to their phone. And I always leave mine in the locker because I want to go in there and actually enjoy myself and have like a halfway decent conversation. But having a conversation with these people is like pulling teeth, bro. Like, they do not want to talk. And several of them go in there with headphones on, like just immediately have completely shut out everybody that could be in there and have a really interesting conversation with. And
That's
I mean, I've had a few of them in the past couple of months, but 9 times out of 10, like there's like 5 or 6 people in there. They're all on their phones or they have headphones on. I'm like, this is boring. Like, I don't want to be in here just sitting and sweating and not talking. Like, actually talking helps you get through the sauna. Like you can stay in there longer if you're having a really good conversation because you're not thinking about the heat.
Yeah, and also, for me, one of the key reasons I go to the sauna, not just because it's fantastically healthy and it's really good for your health, but one of the key reasons I go to there is actually to detune. Like I'm somebody whose mind goes 1,000 miles an hour. I'm not ever sat doing nothing. I'm on the computer, I'm thinking, I'm working. So I go to the sauna as the antidote to that. And to see people on phones, to hear, the little bit of music coming from the things, it would really spoil that. And, it's like, can't we just have something that's sacred, Ryder? Can't we just keep the sauna? It's this little box. We're all in there together, half naked. Can't we just keep that as a sacred space?
Yeah, and it should be. I do breath work in the sauna too, Marissa. When I'm in there by myself, of course, I do it. But when there's other people in there, I try not to, annoy people or, become a frustration for others. But yeah, it's really helpful, especially in the steam room, because the steam room here at the gym that I go to, it gets so steamy, dude. So freaking steamy. You can only stay in there for like 8 minutes, 8 minutes max. Like your body's just
Wow.
burning. But
We
that's a good
just
one to
got
do.
back. We stayed last night at we was away for the night, and my wife booked a place that had a sauna and a steam room, because normally we have to, because where we live in the countryside, there's nowhere like that, so we have to travel to use the sauna each week. And this place was the best I've ever been to, the best sauna, the best steam room. It was just everything. Like the facilities were really cool. And I was in there this morning, and yeah, it's one of the few times where you're in close proximity to people. You're all kind of in there together. And what I've found sometimes, and I don't know if you found this, but I like you, I'll sit and meditate in there. Like I'll cross my legs and I'll close my eyes and I'll try and count my breaths, especially once it starts to get difficult. When you're really hot, it's like, right now I'm going to count to 100, really slow breaths to kind of, push myself. But what I found is when you do that, sometimes other people start to join in. You'll see someone else cross the legs and sit, or you'll see somebody else start to do breath work. And that shared energy kind of spreads out in the steam room. So that's always instructive for me, because it reminds me that we actually do have quite a strong impact on each other. And, we do, like our good habit could rub off on them. And I've been sat in a steam room before and not been meditating, somebody else does, and it encourages me to. So I guess we just need to keep plugging away at other people and try and be a good example. I don't know what you do with somebody with headphones on in the sauna. Like, that's blown my mind. Like, I'm looking forward to telling my wife, like, I can't believe someone would be crazy enough to take like a phone in there. But there you go. You're a few steps ahead of us, I think, in America.
Yep, they'll bring in their phones, they'll bring in their headphones. Some people will literally sit in there and talk on the phone while they're in the
Wow.
sauna.
I'd walk out, at that point, buddy. I'd have to get in. I don't think I could do it. Yeah, because it would just destroy the whole vibe for me if that was happening.
There was this one guy in there one time that, like, I don't know if something was wrong with him or what. He ended up getting kicked out of the gym, but he was acting like he was straight up possessed. Like it was the strangest thing. He had to be obviously mentally not all there, but he would like make these noises, and I was like, is this dude okay? Like, it was really strange, and it sounded like what would be coming from, like, what you would think a demonic entity would sound like. I'm like, is this guy trying to sweat out this entity that he's got on him or something? But it was weird. And then I went to the front desk and I was like, hey man, there's a guy that's in the sauna right now. I don't know what's going on with him, but I would go like check on him. And I did that every time that I would see him in there, because I wanted to make sure that, he was okay and everything. And eventually he became like a really big nuisance to people, and they ended up kicking him out of the gym. Well, that was a wild one. And he would also play these like high pitched frequencies on his phone, dude. I don't know what was going on with that guy, but it was like,
How hot are these saunas? Because the ones that we've got in Europe are like these Finnish saunas, and they get so hot. I just can't imagine anyone being able to concentrate on like a phone or a sound. Like, it really, they're pretty intense things over here. So is it like that there? Is it the same?
It's like a furnace that's inside of the room. It's not like a steam sauna. It's not like where you dump the water on the coals and then it steams up. The gym that I go to has a steam room beside of it, and the steam comes out, and that's what gets you. So I normally go into the sauna and then I hit the steam room after the sauna, because the sauna flushes out your pores and then the steam room gets them off of you. And that's normally how I do it. But it does get really hot in there. Like, I normally get out whenever I feel like that I'm like being woozy. You know that woozy feeling, like you're kind of like just a tad bit sick to your stomach whenever you've been there and in there for a minute.
Yeah,
That's normally my
yeah.
timer to like get out of the sauna. But
But
it's
that's
not
good
like
for you, right?
but it's not
You
like
know,
a steam room sauna with the coals where you like dump the water on it and then it like steams
see,
up
we have
into the
two. We have
sauna.
a
That's what
steam room
creates the
that's
heat.
separate. We have like the coals, but then also a steam room too, and they're kind of different. But we call it a Finnish sauna over here, which is where you have like a heater inside, then you have some hot rocks on the top, and you do create the steam, but it does get pretty hot. But do you guys do the cold plunging as well? Because that's in Europe, particularly where we are in. Somebody mentioned in the live chat, do you have more saunas in Europe? And the answer is yes, particularly in the Baltic countries. So like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, all of those countries, it's normal for people to have a sauna at home. And we also do cold plunging as well. So after we go out the sauna, we'll get into ice cold water, which is normal as well. So do you guys do that as well at the gym? Is there like a place to get in like a really cold bath afterwards?
Yeah, there's a pool that's right beside of the sauna that you can jump into, and I don't like to do that because, like, I would like to shower off before I do that, and I see so many people get out of the sauna and then immediately jump into the pool, so I just don't get into the pool now because all of their sweat is just in the pool, like, they're not
The
showering off before
sexual,
they get
the
out of
bacteria
the
pool.
sauna. Yeah, it's just, like, becoming this cesspit of
You,
nasty germs
you'll be
inside of the
vaccinated
pool.
for everything. If you get in there, you'll be immune to all viruses and all disease.
That's right. That'll get you. You just whenever you come up out of the water, you just take a gulp full of water and swish it around in your mouth and spit it back out.
Yeah,
That'll get
I
you.
mean,
That'll get you for all
where
of it.
we
But
are,
I would love to be. I would love if there was a cold plunge. Like, do they have like cold plunges at the gyms and stuff that you go to?
they do, but it's more like what you said. It's like a shared one. But what we do have over here in winter, because it gets pretty cold. I mean, I'm not sure where you are in the US because I know you get some cold places there as well. But we do a lot of ice water bathing in this time of year. So what we do is we go to the like on a weekend, we'll go to the lake. Oftentimes people do it as like a social thing. We smash a hole in the ice and then we stay as long as we can in the cold. So you'll be there for like it goes up to about your chest, and you'll be in there for about 5 to 6 minutes. I do it in the garden, and we try and mix that with sauna too if we can. So you'll have a sauna and then an outdoor ice bath, and yeah, it's the contrast is really great. I mean, I think these are the natural thrills. Like these the antidote to the quick cheap thrills of watching YouTube videos and all that stuff. It's like no, get out there, do something natural. Cold, heat, I love it all. Yeah, it's really nice.
You stay in there for 5 minutes and in the actual ice and the cold. You
Eventually,
stayed in
but
there
you
for
build
5 minutes the first time you went in?
No, the
I
first
was
time
gonna
it was
say,
probably more
holy
like
crap.
20 or 30. But what we do is we start doing it going into autumn. So preparing for winter. And what you find is by the time you get to the -10, -20, you've built up this really solid cold tolerance. Like you don't feel the -5 like you would if you didn't do the cold baths. And we also don't like I've never been ill since I started doing this. We've never had a flu. In the UK, I used to get winter flus all the time. It was like an annual thing, but that's never happened. So I stick with it. And yeah, there's some like the first time I actually saw people doing it, I never knew it was like a national sport here. Like everyone does it. And it was -4 or -5. And I was riding to the local park. I had every kind of like layers upon layers on. And then I guess to the park. This was when I was living with my in-laws. And I see about 16 half naked bodies. And I'm looking, the lake's frozen over. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like some kind of race or something? And my wife was like, no, it's Mossavania. I was like, Mossavania? I was like, what's that? And she was like, well, it means like sea lions. I was like, okay. And she was like, they're going to get in the water. And then I was like, wow. I was like, okay, well, we've got to try that next week. And yeah, I fell in love with the kind of, it's, as much as I like the sauna, I like doing this in winter too.
They get completely naked and get in the ice. You skinny dip in that ice, bro?
No, they had some clothes on, but this is a thing that we do in Europe, and I don't think you do it in America. Is kind of 50-50 in European sauna, whether it's naked or not. So there are, in Germany, it's pretty much all naked saunas. Estonia, most families sauna naked. So the whole family will be in there naked. It's normal over there. Poland, it's 50-50. It's a lot of people here are very conservative, so they don't want nude saunas, but they are starting to creep in. The place I was at this morning was there was some rooms that some people were nude in, some rooms that people weren't. I'm not really too happy with the nude stuff. I prefer not. I'd like to have my clothes on. I think sauna's intense enough without naked bodies all around, but it is kind of normalized in Europe to do that as well. So I'm guessing it's probably not the same in America.
No, it's all clothes. If you went into a public sauna naked, dude, like, which are a lot of the saunas that I've been in are like dual, like, people. It's not just men. It's not just women. Like, it's like you both can go in the same sauna.
Oh, same. Yeah, same.
Oh, it's the same there. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, if it's socially acceptable and that's the thing to do, then I don't have anything against it. If they want to do it, do it.
I think if it's normalized in your culture, then and you kind of brought up with that, then that's fine. You're probably not going to find it like awkward. But I think for people who haven't, to all of a sudden be in a room full of like naked people and it not be a sexualized setting, it's like, no, we're here to do sauna. I'd struggle with that. I'm like, where do I look? Like, pour some steam on there. I don't want to have to see all this stuff. Yeah, I prefer the clothed one. I think culture's moved on a little bit, but I know I've got friends from Estonia and stuff, and she told me that like everyone has a sauna, and like if you went to your friend's house, you'll sauna naked. Like it was really part of their culture. So I guess
I got nothing against it. If they want to be naked, they can be 100% naked. I don't care. I mean, now that I think about it, I think that is the way that most saunas are in other countries. Like they're just like completely naked saunas, but the sauna, like you would get a public indecency charge here if you went into a sauna naked. Now, you probably wouldn't get one if it was like an all dude sauna, like, because no dude is going to care if you're naked inside of the sauna. Like, it's not going to really be, I mean, they'll probably care, they'll probably complain, but it's not going to be a big deal. But if you're in a public one with like family or women, and you're a dude and you're in there naked, oh yeah, dude, ain't no way.
Yeah,
ain't gonna fly.
These people taking phones into the sauna, then of course, like no one's gonna, you know what I mean? Like it's a cultural shift, right? We used to have a much more respectful culture. People would have, been adult about that, but in today's world, I don't think so. And if people are taking phones into the sauna, I could see people getting into fights, like, worried that someone might film them. Unfortunately, we're not living in the same era as like the 1950s and 60s, where maybe in certain cultures that stuff would be handled well. Today, we're in a different place, buddy.
But that says a lot about the culture in Europe and in other countries, that they can go into a sauna naked with other people and it not be an issue and it not be a thing, and people like not be like freaked out about it. It shows like self-control,
Yeah, I got a good friend in Germany, and we was hanging out not so long back, and he came across to where I live, and we said, "Oh, you wear clothes in the sauna here?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, in Germany nobody does, so it's still kind of part of their culture. Doesn't matter, mixed." So yeah, it's a cultural thing, and Europe for a long time has been, we are quite. I mean, for Americans, I don't think Americans understand quite what Europe's like, but it's very tolerant cultures, very conservative. We're very introvert in a sense, although you might think it's extrovert to be naked in a sauna, I guess, but we're very polite. People will sit there quietly, eyes on the floor. It is like that in Europe. We're not as loud as in the US, I don't think.
We have naked beaches here. Do you guys have naked? I don't know if you live on the coast or anything like that.
Yeah, we do. I actually, I was running on the beach this year, and I ran too far, and I was like, "Whoa, all the clothes have gone." And I felt I was on the nudist beach, and then I got back to my wife. I said, "Well, I know where the nudist beach is. It's about a mile that away." So that was, but yeah, I mean, again, like that stuff to me, it's like, no, if you want to be naked on a beach, be naked on a beach. It's like I'm a big advocate of being naked, just not around everyone else. Like in my garden where there's no one around, yeah, sunbathe, the sun's out, get that sun on your skin. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we should embrace our bodies and ability to go out. But I'm not a public nude person. No, that's not me.
Mike out there in his garden acting like Adam and Eve, naked out there, pruning his crops.
That's actually my that's one of my criteria for a house. Like, how do you know it's private enough? Can you walk around the garden naked? If it's a yes, then yeah, it's private enough for me.
You just got one leaf, like right over your genitals. Your wife's got the 2 leaves on her breast. It's freaking funny, dude. Super funny. Well, Mike, my friend, it's been an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a fun, laid back chat, and appreciate you a lot, my friend. Let people know where they can find you online, plug your social medias, plug anything that you would like to talk about.
Cheers, Ryder. Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. It's been fun. It's kind of what I needed after speaking about fires in LA to have a nice laid back conversation. So thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, you can find me on parallelmic.com. My podcast is over there where we do full length episodes. I like to research. So similar to Ryder, I like to know a topic, really go into it. And we kind of explore a little bit of everything on there: esoteric, spirituality, and also the history of finance. Yeah, monetary history I really like as well. And then I've also got my kind of topical show about finance, which is the Parallel Systems broadcast. You can find it on YouTube, Substack, and we've also got a Patreon community, which of course it's like anything else. If you really did like the content, then there's newsletter over there which you can check out. So I'm sure Ryder will put it in the description. So thanks again, Ryder.
Is the podcast different than your channel? Do you do different things on the audio only version of the podcast than you do on your YouTube channel?
I do, yeah. So the YouTube, I do put some of my podcast episodes on there just to kind of spread the word, but my YouTube channel is mainly about finance, so it's a bit more topical, what's happening. I speak a lot about some of the big trends that are happening, wealth preservation. I kind of put my monetary research, whereas on the podcast, yeah, I just had my latest episode was Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers. So we had a great conversation about the solar maximum, cycles, cataclysm. I try and get a real mix on there, but it's definitely biased towards what I'm really into. So I like the esoteric. I'm a Christian too, so I like to talk about cataclysm, end times. I find it fascinating. Hidden histories. So the history of the financial system, the stuff we don't get told. And similar to you, Ryder, I just really like to get into stuff and find stuff that's new. Like when you was doing your Shining documentary, you found a few things in there where I'm sure you was like, I may be the first person to ever found that. Like that's an exciting thing for me. And you don't get to do it all the time, but I find, there's a lot of these histories that people just haven't really looked at very well. And maybe somebody did at some point, but it just wasn't recorded. So I like to go and scrape over something again and see what's really there underneath the surface. So I try and bring listeners along for that journey on the podcast. And yeah, it's what I enjoy doing.
Well, speaking of Adam and Eve and cataclysms and Christianity, have you read this CIA document, the Adam and Eve story?
Yeah, I actually read the full first chapter at the end of my episode with Ben Davidson and kind of explain what it is and why it's important. It's actually you read chapter number 1 of that. It's pretty terrifying stuff, right? It's
pretty scary.
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I actually warned my listeners. I was like, right, I'm going to read chapter 1, but really consider if you want to read this full book, because maybe you don't need to read it. It's out there, and I don't know. What do you think about, before we leave, what's your take on this pole shift? Do you think, first of all, it's legitimate, and secondly, that it looks like we're going towards it, or do you take it more with a pinch of salt?
Well, either way, I think that this document is really interesting because it actually gives you, this this timeline of like events and where, if some kind of huge natural disaster happens, the safest place to be. And I believe that it says that the safest place is in Colorado, if you're in the United States, of course. That's the one that I paid attention to because I'm probably not going to be in a completely different country. If anything like that happens, I'm probably going to be in the United States. But it talks about how Colorado, in the mountains of Colorado, I think it's around the Estes Park, I believe, is that area. That if you're in Estes Park and you're on top of the mountain and this big cataclysm happens, that's like the safest place for you to possibly survive this giant cataclysm that may or may not be coming. But the document also says that it's probably not going to happen in our lifetime as well. So I don't know what to think of it, but it's a really interesting article. I'll actually throw it in the chat here for if anybody wants to check it out. And I mean, not an article, but a document, if they want to read through it, because I definitely thought that it was really interesting, and definitely interesting that it, came out of the CIA .gov website. What's your thoughts on it before we wrap up here?
Well, don't read it before bed is my first thought. You might not sleep too well at night. And secondly, I think with all of these things, I'm a big fan of cycles, and certainly there is cycles to cataclysm. So we know that. And if you look back throughout the historic record, a geographic record, you can find evidence of civilization collapse events where all of a sudden the fossils disappear and everyone's gone. Clearly we disappeared for a time. So I think these things do happen, Ryder. Whether we're living through it now, well, I think every generation has always had these stories around, this is the generation there's going to be a cataclysm. It's going to happen now. And maybe that's a part of what they want people to think as well. Like maybe that's being encouraged right now to make us more submissive to just saying, well, we can't do nothing about this. It's divinely written that it's going to happen. We just have to step aside. So I take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. However, I also do think there is evidence that we are living through a time of big, big shifts. And maybe that could explain also some of the things that are happening in terms of geoengineering and agendas 2030, 2050. Maybe that's a part of it. So I look into it, but I also say to people, at the end of the day, look at, I try to live with Stoic philosophy. Can I change it? No. Well, file it under unimportant. It's important to know about it. Okay, I'm not saying it's completely unimportant, but why get yourself wrapped up in a cataclysm? I said to my wife recently, I was like, if it's going to happen, what are you going to do about it? I'm not going to go to the top of that mountain in Colorado, put it that way. I'm not sure I'd want to survive that cataclysm. I think I might want to be right at the epicenter of it intentionally, because the survivors ain't going to have an easy one. I'm joking, of course, but no, I think for stuff like that, you just got to say, live every day as it comes, be a decent person, enjoy your life. If a cataclysm happens, well, so be it. You got to see some wild times whilst you was here.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And thanks so much for coming on, Mike. Really appreciate your time this evening. The links to Mike's information, I've dropped them in the chat a few times, but it's also in the description of this video. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And we'll see you guys next time. Mike, stay with me.